So it's just mind-boggling to me how 40 million Christians in America don't even bother to vote. I mean, can you believe that? Well, the latest God's Not Dead movie is all about exercising your right to make your voice heard.
With the God's Not Dead movies, obviously, right, this is our 5th installment, hard to believe. But again, getting back to, it is not, we didn't do it because it's number 5. It's because we felt like, you know what, there's a hole in this, there's a place in our culture right now that needs something to speak to it. And the God's Not Dead movies have a unique way in presenting a message of what's going on that's culturally relevant.
I'm David Sams, and this is CIA Contagious Influencers of America. Today I've got David A.R. White with me right here in the Homestead studio. Of course, he's an actor, producer, author, and filmmaker. He's one of the most visible actors in all of inspirational films. And of course, most notably, stars in the God's Not Dead movies. And now his newest film is God's Not Dead, In God We Trust. And it's set to be in theaters on September the 12th. And it has a great cast. Let me see. We have Isaiah Washington from Grey's Anatomy, Dean Cain from Lois and Clark. Then we have Scott Baio from Happy Days and Charles in Charge and Diagnosis Murder. And this movie is all about the importance of exercising your voice, your vote, and keeping... I'm not going to give it away. All I'm going to say is there are something like 40 million Americans, 40 million Christians in America, 40 million Christians that don't even bother to vote. And once you see this movie, my friends, you're going to go vote. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't be surprised if you take others to vote who maybe can't get there, and you're going to want to probably early vote. This movie is that powerful. It's that impactful. And it's something you've absolutely got to see. And I applaud David. I applaud the folks from the God's Not Dead franchise. What is this, number 5 or something? I have to admit, the first one was my favorite. I mean, it came out of nowhere, and that always been but I think this is number 2. I think this is right up there. You know, as a matter of fact, I was talking to David Williams here about the Rocky movies. You know, it's like, which one's your favorite? You know, there's nothing like the original, but I'll tell you, there were some great ones to follow, you know, but I'm going to have David A.R. White here in just a second. But first, let's take a look at God's Not Dead, In God We Trust.
Christians are being called to deliver hope to a country that's feeling hopeless. Why was America, what was it built on? What were the principles that it was built on? And that's what God's Not Dead, In God We Trust is all about.
We're 6 weeks out from Election Day. And remember, this is a fight for the soul of our nation. We're at a tipping point, I really believe, in this country. Democracy was always fragile, so we have to have our faith.
I think our country is so divided right now over so many different things. And does God have a place there? In our political system, does it influence us as believers and who we are?
There are more ordained ministers in Congress right now than ever before in all of American history. Why do you think that is, David?
The recurring theme is really the title, that God isn't dead. He's at work in our world. And he's working through people, sometimes ordinary people.
Did Reverend Dave set out to be in politics? Not at all. But God has an interesting way of using us in ways that we would never imagine. I'm not a politician.
Do you think the country really needs another politician? I discovered that politics is a really dirty game. You don't win unless you play by their rules.
I've already lost if I do.
That's one of the great things about these films, is that there's something in them for everybody, you know, and there's something in there for families and all ages.
In God we trust, in God we trust, 'cause there is power in his name.
We still get comments today all the time on how that movie, you know, affected people and their daily life.
It'd be a mistake to underestimate this guy. People love an underdog story. People should come see this film and all the God's Not Dead movies. And I pray that we return to being a country that values tradition and values who we are as Americans.
How do you know it's God?
You know someone long enough, you begin to recognize his voice.
It talks about real people, real relationships. You can relate to all the characters, and they're all going through something.
This movie is going to be, I think, really even more powerful, or just as powerful as the first one. 40 million Christians don't vote. And another 15 million aren't even registered.
And I think that if we don't make some big changes in this country, we could lose our country. We could lose the freedoms that we have taken for granted. That concerns me very much.
In God we trust.
Hey, well, David, welcome to the homestead.
Hey, appreciate it. Love it.
Okay, I saw the movie last night. I watched it outside as I was having a cigar on the front porch. Beautiful night last night, by the way. And I'm sitting there going, oh, first of all...
What movie?
Your movie.
Oh, God's Not Dead. God's not dead. In God We Trust. I just checking.
There's been so many of them.
Well, I didn't even know which movie you're talking about. I was wondering, you're having a cigar and watching some movie.
Hey, I gave up my nightly watching Vikings for you last night.
Okay. All right. That's hilarious.
I was just waiting for you to spear somebody.
It's just spear somebody. Could you please spear somebody? That's a different movie, but yeah.
But I was watching. I thought, number one, I thought it was a lot better than I had expected, to tell you the truth.
Oh, come on.
No, I'm serious, because you know what?
Four was good.
Yeah, I love the franchise and all that, but first of all, you start thinking, and you think that there's a motive behind it, and there's a we're in an election season, etc. And I'm like, here we go. But you know what? It was daggone good, and you did a phenomenal job, and it was so obviously timely. And the acting, I thought you did a superb job. Everybody.
Thank you. Yeah.
But there was let's talk about the purpose of this movie.
Yeah.
And I was blown away, especially at the end when you said there are 40 million Christians who don't even bother to vote.
Yeah, in presidential elections.
And I think then you said 15 million don't even register, something like that.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah. 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 I mean, this is the 10-year anniversary for the first God's Not Dead. So 2014 was the first one that came out, and I think when it came out, it certainly revolutionized Christian films in the theater.
Sure did. Yeah.
There was nothing like it at the time. And so, for each God's Not Dead movie, it's not like we set out to do 5 of these, right? This is the 5th installment. But we always feel like there's a purpose for something comes up there. There's a lot of prayer that goes into what is this supposed to be about? And the kernel of a concept comes, and it always seems to be culturally relevant for such a time as that. Like the first one, the second one, and third, even like every single one of them they drop in right when culture is going through what it's going through. And so this one is the same. It's not like we set out to do, the 5th installment, which is God's Not Dead, in God We Trust. But it is a political, there's no doubt about it. It's an election movie. It's an election year. But this movie has been 18 months. We were trying to push this movie before, and we kept getting blocked. But now we understand it, right? Because that stat that you said, the 40 million American Christians who don't vote in a presidential election, and here we are in a presidential election. Well, doesn't it make sense for this movie to come out and talk about, should Christians even be involved in politics? So yeah, I mean, it's an interesting timing issue.
So, what should Christians be involved in politics?
Well, you have to see the movie for that. I can't just say that the answer's here. Yeah, I mean, for so long it's like, well, okay, the separation between church and state, right? We've dealt with that, and then in this movie, I play the same returning pastor, Reverend Dave, and the incumbent passes away, and there's only 4 weeks before the election, and they're saying, hey, we want you to run for this seat that nobody else wants to run for. It's a very pivotal seat, whereas your opponent is trying to remove God from every aspect of our country. And of course, I think like most believers, we kind of feel like politics is a dirty business. We don't want to get involved in that. And yet he's faced with this decision. Is he going to do it, or is he not? Is he going to accept the call that he believes God put on him, or is he going to run from it?
Well, and I think the real issue is if Christians don't get involved, we're going to continue to lose more and more of our rights to worship and to express our faith and to really engage and to share. By the way of, what's happened in Europe, they've kind of led the way of all that. So tell me why, first of all, let's go back to the beginning. What inspired the entire idea of God's Not Dead, the franchise that you've created all these years?
Yeah. Well, it was, there was a book called God's Not Dead by Rice Brooks that was coming out. There was a song, obviously, by the Newsboys that had already hit the marketplace. And one of our investors, Troy Duhan, actually approached us and said, hey, I don't know exactly what this is, other than I feel like this is supposed to go now. That's all I know. And he was pitching me. He had a baby on his lap, and so we took the idea of that, and we had always been wanting to do a movie that dealt with apologetics in the classroom. We didn't exactly know where that was, or the fact of all the all the things that were going on in the colleges at the time. That's a tremendous amount of lawsuits and everything about, and the indoctrination from those instructors to our kids. And so again, it kind of came out, and if you even look at the end of God's Not Dead, there's like 50 lawsuits that were happening at the same time from the universities.
And it's only gotten worse.
Yeah. It's
we thought it was bad 10 years ago.
Yeah, there's that line in the movie that talks about, like, you thought it was bad when they removed prayer in school. Like, imagine what it's going to be when they remove God from our country. Because that's what they're trying to do more and more. I mean, even like in COVID, you remember how that was? Like, the churches were like the last thing that they could open up. Mm-hmm. We could go everywhere else, the bars, everywhere else, and people could mingle, but not the churches. Whoa, let's just leave them closed, especially in Los Angeles. That was a weird time. And so, we're seeing more and more of that. But I also want to be clear that this movie isn't just about politics, because not everybody wants to see a political movie. It's really at the core of all, I feel like all the God's Not Dead movies are. It's about hope, it's about life, it's about perseverance, and it's about where does God fit in the middle of this kind of a situation.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. No, that's what I got. I was very entertained. Obviously there was some education involved, but I don't go to movies to get educated. I go to to be entertained. Who
wants to do that?
And I was I get enough education watching cable news. It may not be the right, but I was really when I say I was quite surprised, I was quite surprised because I had read I'd read the highlights of the film, and I thought, this is interesting at this time in history, and going a couple months into the election. I can see the purpose behind it, but I thought you guys did a phenomenal job of entertaining me for 2 hours, and I really would suggest that people go see it because they're going to be entertained, they're going to be encouraged. There's going to be hope that comes across, and you did a phenomenal job in your role. I love your speech at the end. That was great.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. For some reason, people keep writing me these speeches. I don't know if you saw, in God's Not Dead, in God, or We the People, which was the 4th installment, the last one. But yeah, I don't. It's not like I set out. My dad was a pastor, right? My dad was he always wanted me to become an evangelist, and I never knew why. And I also didn't want to become an evangelist, and here I am playing a pastor. I also was like running from the ministry. I didn't want to be involved in ministry.
Hey, if you make another 15 of these, you can just string together all the speeches together and then you'll have another movie.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. Or have a teaching session. Apparently, I have
curriculum and the whole works.
Exactly. People have said, why don't you go out like on a speaking tour and take pieces of your God's Not Dead speeches and you could just talk about each one of them. And I was like, yeah, well, I mean, we do that in movies. I don't know that we need to do it. I don't know that we need to bring it beyond that. But I also want to talk about the cast in this movie.
Yeah,
cast is pretty remarkable.
It really is.
I mean, from we have all these returning cool figures from now. It's almost like the God's Not Dead universe. We're not we're not Fast and Furious yet, right? We haven't done 10 of them, but we're on our way.
Yeah.
But so Dean Cain comes back, which is cool. Isaiah Washington comes back. Paul Quo as Martin comes back. Like we have all these different, from the different things. And then of course, Ray Wise if you remember from God's Not Dead 2, boy, was he a nasty guy in that movie. And here he is.
He plays
again.
a great nasty guy.
Yeah, he's really, really good as the adversary in this one too. Samir Armstrong is wonderful as my love interest, and just like there's so many great people in this movie. Yeah, Scott Baio. Let's talk about Scott Baio. How cool is that?
Yeah, when I was interviewing Scott, the first thing I said to him is, "Man, you play a great scumbag." He's like, "Who are you? Is this the gotcha moment?"
I just literally wrapped a movie in Miami, and I have him as a hitman in that movie. And I said, and he comes in and he mows in and he's with this silencer and kills all these people in this club. And I'm like, I was like, Scott, you actually did that really, really well, because they're firing blanks, of course. But I mean, but I was like, and he's like, yeah, this is like the first time I've ever fired a gun in a movie. I was like, what? In my career? And I was like, well, it didn't look like it because, he was very good at it and being a scumbag. But we love Scott Baio, for the record. He's awesome. I met Scott like in church maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I would always see him walking in a little bit late, and he would always go to the same spot, and I'm always at the same spot up top in Westlake Village. And
we all went to the same church.
Yeah.
Calvary, yeah.
Yeah.
Sean's a good friend.
Did you always see Scott coming in?
Oh, well, I just go there now when I visit, but okay. I was there for many years I was there when Larry DeWitt was there, Sean, of course, forever.
I love him. Yeah,
and it's a great church. Great church.
Well, that's how I met Scott originally. Yeah. I kept looking down and going, that's Scott Baio. Scott Baio. Someday I'm going to meet Scott Baio. And then, it's been cool. This is like our 4th film together, I think.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So let's rewind a little bit and talk about you're one of the founders of PureFlix.
Yeah.
And now you have what? Pinnacle Pictures?
Pinnacle Peak.
Pinnacle Peak. Okay. Yeah. And PureFlix, of course, produced some great content over the years, and now it's evolved into
Pinnacle Peak Productions.
Pinnacle Peak Productions. Okay.
Yeah. Well, PureFlix got taken over by Sony.
Right.
And Great American. Yeah. So Great American PureFlix is what it's called.
Yeah. And they're involved in this.
They are. Yeah. Yep. It goes to the streaming platform. I mean, PureFlix is the only place that you can get all the God's Not Dead streaming right now.
Gotcha.
So okay. That's what PureFlix was supposed to be. It was supposed to be the faith and family platform,
right?
And it's the only one of its kind. And if you're out there and you want to make another platform, go for it. We could use more, but it's definitely hard.
So what inspired you years ago to start PureFlix?
Years and years ago, I sat on a curb with Kevin Downs, of all things.
Good buddy.
Yeah.
And I noticed he has a cameo in the movie.
He does.
For 3 seconds.
Well, he was in a few more scenes, but they got cut on our redo because we reshot like probably 25% of the movie, 30% of the movie. Yeah. So, which is how it happens. Like I think we took like 4 swings at this movie to get it right. You always want to make sure that it's not just like you had thought that it would be. It's just another, well, okay, here we go again. No, each movie really needs to be a standalone movie by itself, and also needs to be special in its own right. we put a lot of care on this movie. Put a lot of time into it. Yeah.
And by the way, when I say that, I don't mean that in a derogatory way.
No,
it's
I
like,
don't. I didn't take it that
There's
way.
nothing like the original
I would
Rocky.
agree.
When you get to
100%,
Rocky
yeah.
17, it's like
I was on the plane last night, and the person in front of me was watching Rocky 2.
Really?
It was the opening, and I was like, we've been at the airport for 8 hours, right? So we were a little bit, I think I landed here in Nashville at 2 a.m. So I was a little loopy anyway on this plane, and I'm looking in between the seats, and I'm like, is that Rocky?
Right.
No, it's Rocky 2. Oh, and I was like, watching for a little bit. Speaking of.
Yeah. So getting back to the story.
Oh, yeah, sorry. The question. Yeah, I'm just going off on all these long tangents.
I pulled you there, so.
Yes, PureFlix, the original thought of it was, Kevin and I were like, we had a dream early on that someday every studio would have a faith-based label. It wasn't the case. The only people making Christian movies at the time was the Worldwide Pictures with the Billy Graham organization, and they would make it every 2-3 years. Mm-hmm. So there was like this massive audience, the faith-based audience that was underserved, and no one was making movies for them. And Kevin and I had this early dream that we believe that God put inside of us to build out this place. And of course the Kendricks had it too, and different people along the way have had, God obviously doesn't just say, oh, it's all up to you, David.
Yeah.
Thank God, or Kevin. But certainly, we were the early pioneers for this industry, and we're grateful to be part of that. And so PureFlix came out of that as at the time we were making these movies, and the studios weren't picking them up. So then we're like, okay, well then we need a production distribution studio, and that's where PureFlix came out of.
And it's amazing what has happened in over the last 10, 15 years or so. I guess last 10 years, right? Was God's Not Dead your first? It wasn't the first picture, was it?
It was our first quote unquote theatrical.
First theatrical. Okay.
Yeah. We had done quite a few movies. In fact, at PureFlix, I think I produced like 70 movies at this point, and probably maybe about 15, 20 TV shows for the platform primarily. But before that, we had a whole run of home entertainment movies. Movies like Sarah's Choice, Blink of an Eye, Hidden Secrets, my favorite, Holy Man Undercover, if you haven't seen it. Have you not seen Holy Man Undercover?
No.
All right, so you and your darling wife have to sit down in this theater maybe and watch that movie. It's like a Dumb and Dumber. Uh-huh. And I mean, it was totally blackballed from the Christian industry,
right,
which makes it even more interesting. Like, why? Like, CBA would not, they had all these other movies. We had a whole PureFlix section, and they were like, we will not take Holy Man Undercover. It was the funniest thing. So it's on PureFlix now, pureflix.com. But you can also get it, whatever, on Amazon or whatever. But it is a funny watch. I played 2 characters. And it's kind of my life story just expanded.
Oh, okay. So, yeah. Okay. So you're the son of a pastor,
preacher, yeah,
right? And so
a Mennonite pastor.
Mennonite. So when you decided to get in the film business, what did they think?
Yeah. Well, I went to, all my family had gone to Moody Bible Institute in Chicago, and so they had all met their significant others. My mom met my dad there. My brother met his wife there. My sister met her husband there, and they all graduated from there and became, went into the ministry. And then here I went 1 year, and then and I said, Dad, Mom, I'm going to leave Bible school to go to Hollywood to be an actor. And there's this long pause on the phone, and they're like, okay. As long as you serve the Lord and whatever you do, we support you. So that was that. And then I moved to LA when I was 19.
And what'd you do at that point?
I was on, I was there 6 months, and then I got on the hit television show Evening Shade with Burt Reynolds.
Oh, yeah, sure.
So I was on there for about 3.5 years until I got fired from there. And then,
of course, everybody just moves to Hollywood. Go. Everybody moves to Hollywood and gets a gig in 6 months on network TV.
Yeah, it was truly a blessing from the Lord. Because on this show, everybody had won an Oscar, an Emmy, or a Tony. Everybody from Hal Holbrook, Ozzie Davis, Ruby Dee, Elizabeth Ashley, Charles Durning. I mean,
what a cast!
People that I had never heard of.
Yeah, amazing.
Then we had Kenny Rogers, John Ritter, Dom DeLuise, Terry Bradshaw, come on as guest stars. Again, never heard of any of them. Didn't know who any of these people were at the time, other than Burt Reynolds, and that was it.
Yeah.
And then slowly I started looking at their careers, going, "Oh my goodness!" As they would all kind of take an interest in me in different ways. Hal Holbrook, like Elizabeth Ashley, were so sweet and kind to me because I was a 19-year-old kid from a farm, who had a dream. I was a very strong believer at the time, and so, but they all just, it was an amazing learning experience for me.
Now, is that streaming?
I'm not sure where Evening Shade is. I mean, it's syndicated sometimes. Just depends on where.
Do you get residual checks?
I still do, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, they're not much at this point. 30 years ago.
Yeah.
When I was 15.
So, what are the ingredients that you look for in a film that you are going to put a year or two of your life into, or 3 years?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it has to be a God's Not Dead movie. That's an interesting. It's like with the God's Not Dead movies, obviously, right? This is our 5th installment. Hard to believe, but again, getting back to it is not. We didn't do it because it's number 5. It's because we felt like, there's a hole in this. There's a place in our culture right now that needs something to speak to it, and the God's Not Dead movies have a unique way in presenting a message of what's going on that's culturally relevant. For whatever reason, that franchise, I feel like, really fills that well. And people depend on that when they go to see it. That's part of the whole thing, which is no matter where I go, it's so amazing. Like yesterday, I was stuck in an airport on and off for 8 hours, right? The amount of different people, different conversations I had yesterday in that airport. You just, even as I'm walking by, or I'm leaving the airport, or I'm in an Uber, or of people whose lives have been transformed by that franchise. Mm-hmm. Most of the time, they obviously, more out of the times than not, people have seen the first one, right? But sometimes 2, 3, 4, whatever one strikes a nerve in them that causes them to, hopefully that it reconnects people to have conversations about what's going on in their life. It opens up conversations in a lot of ways with their family members that maybe, or friends that they wouldn't have had normally. And so we hope, and every single time, if we're going to do it, Lord, make it that it's of you and not of us. We don't want to just do another one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now the question I've been wanting to ask you for some time.
Oh boy,
I can't sleep at night.
That's a big question.
The AR thing in your name, is that to make you stand out so you're not David White?
I mean, do you know what I did? I was at this speaking engagement in San Diego like 2 days ago, and Pastor David White comes up to me and he says, "I'm David White." And I said, "I'm sorry, what?" And he was a reverend. He goes, "Yeah, I'm a reverend. You have no idea how many calls I get that people think I'm you." And it's finally nice to meet you in person for the first time, right? And I said, "Well, I'm David A.R. White. So what's your," he goes, "Well, I'm David R. White."
Oh, no.
And so, people call me, like, they just think AR is together. So then a lot of times they're like David R. White. They don't, put the periods in there, and so it's just the AR is mushed together.
So what is the A and the R?
Well, so I was the last kid of all my parents' children, so I got 4 names because they felt like they needed a gem in there. So it's David Andrew Roy White. So when I joined SAG, David White was taken because that was Larry Tate on Bewitched.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so they were like, "Well, you can't be David White. There's already David White." Then I tried David Andrew White.
Was he alive?
Larry had just passed, actually. In fact, my first audition ever, I went in and the lady literally started tearing up, the casting director. And I was like...
You were that bad?
That's what I thought. I was like, wow. That was either incredibly moving what I did or incredibly painful. And she goes, David White just passed. And I was like, huh, who's David White? And then I was like, oh yeah. Well, I'd seen it growing up, Bewitched. So then, David Andrew White was taken. David Roy White was taken. So it's like all these things. So I just was like, well, Michael J. Fox was huge at the time with the initials. I was like, well, how about if I just initial it? Can I do that? And they're like, yeah, that's not taken. So there it is.
Clever.
It wasn't clever. It was just it was a matter of, that doesn't work, that doesn't work, that doesn't work, that doesn't work. All right, I guess I'll just take David A.R. White.
So what's the project? What's the film that you want to do that you just hope somebody's going to step up and say, I've got an open checkbook. Let's go make it happen.
Oh, good question. God's Not Dead, the next installment.
We know you have the money in the account for that one, okay? But what's the one big thing that you love to do?
I don't have a specific one that I'm like dying to do. I've been wanting to move more into the action thriller, what we would call red state action, so to speak. And I just finished one called A Line of Fire, and it was about corruption in the FBI. And there's just some stories like that.
We know that doesn't happen.
Exactly. It's just a movie. But life imitates art for some reason that we. So I'm pretty happy moving into that realm, and so we're gonna see. And then, of course, we'll see where God's Not Dead, this movie lands, and people. By the way, this movie also, got to get back to God's Not Dead. In God We Trust, in theaters September 12th. Please don't miss that. First of all, every single time somebody goes out and they buy a ticket to these movies, they are casting a vote to say we want more of these films in our theaters. And we need more of these things. So don't just support our movie. Please go support all Christian filmmakers. And the second thing is that this movie also, highlights, like we had talked about, that statistic that 40 million American Christians do not vote in presidential elections. Yes, this is an election movie. But yes, it's a movie about hope. It's about where in the world do Christians fit into this political climate? Should we not? And at the end of this movie is a QR code to help people to get out and register to vote, to stop that. Because if we don't step up, then there's that line that Isaiah says in this movie about, people don't want to be involved. People don't like to take out the trash, right? People don't want to be involved in politics. People don't really want to take out the trash either. But if you don't take it out, it begins to stink. And more what we've seen with our culture is it going sideways. More and more, which is crazy. And never thought in a million years that America would be looking like it is now.
Well, David A.R. White.
A.R. White.
Thank you so much for the time we've spent, and thanks for stopping by the homestead. The God's Not Dead.
In God We Trust.
In God We Trust. It's theaters on September 12th.
Newsboys are back, by the way, too.
Oh, you know what? We actually had them here last week.
You did?
Yeah, they did the takeover for this.
Okay.
That's going to air, I think, the week before.
Good.
So I was in Aruba, but Denise did it for us. So she did a great job.
Oh,
and
wow.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
That's why you look so nice and tan.
It's just the white hair. No, but they're great. I mean, they really they're a big part of this franchise.
They really are, and it's an interesting thing of how they weren't in the We the People, the number 4, and it was funny because they called and they said, we missed that one, but we don't want to miss this one. And so I was talking to Tate. This is a funny story, real quick, because I was talking to Tate and we were shooting in South Carolina and we didn't know exactly what it was going to be called. Obviously God's Not Dead. And we were tooling around with a Fight for the Soul of the Nation, which ironically has been now thrust front and center into a lot of headlines. Mm-hmm. We didn't know that at the time. This is like a year ago. And In God We Trust. And we were leaning toward, we felt like it was more, this movie, we don't want to, again, it's a political movie. It's a an election movie, but we don't want to, it's not just that, right? It's still at the core, it's more about God and where do we fit in his plan. And so I'm on the phone with him and I'm sitting behind the license plate and Tate's like, I just wrote this song called In God We Trust. And I said, that's ironic. I mean, we're leaning towards, that's probably the title of the movie. And then in front, in the license plate in South Carolina, I guess it says, In God We Trust.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I was like, and I'm sitting there right there. And I'm like, wow, I think that's the name of the movie.
Fantastic.
Love those guys.
That's great. Well, thanks for stopping by, and we wish you much success, and can't wait for the next interview with God's Not Dead 6.
But first, go see September 12th, In God We Trust, God's Not Dead.
Thanks again, David. Always great to have you right here at the Homestead. And God's Not Dead, the movie, is heading to theaters exclusively on September the 12th. And you can check out more at godsnotdead.com. And also you can get your tickets in advance there. So please do that. And thank you so much, David, for stopping by, and just keep up the good work. We're so proud of you and proud of the films that you're making. So kudos to you and the team. We really appreciate you. This has been CIA Contagious Influencers of America, from the producers of the #1 faith-based radio show in all of American syndication. And of course, you can check out our website at KeepTheFaith.com, where we've got all kinds of goodies for you right there. You will love it over there at KeepTheFaith.com. And of course, for more of our Contagious Influencers podcast, you can check out ContagiousInfluencers.com. That's ContagiousInfluencers.com. Please do rate and review us. I would really appreciate 5 stars. If you feel so inclined, that'd be wonderful. But please do rate and review us, all right? That's how people find out about us, my friends. And this week, do me a favor, go out there and live that life in living color, because it sure is a heck of a lot more interesting than living it in black and white. See you next time.